Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Mark Montgomery. He is a retired Rear Admiral from the U.S. Navy, but now he's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Sir, we were just talking about some of the cyber threats from the People's Republic of China, so please continue with your comments on that.
Hey, so thanks, Tony. In fact, I was mentioning cyber espionage, and the case that drew a lot of attention recently beyond Secretary Raimondo was breaking into apparently in 2020 and 2021, penetrating the Japanese classified security networks, which is really an impressive feat by the Chinese, and one where they would have been able to access and download capability assessments, war plans, alliance documents. So very significant one there. So that's cyber espionage. The second element of this is the positioning of malware or malicious software in national critical infrastructures, such as telecommunications, transportation like ports, electrical power grids, water systems, financial services systems. We've reported now publicly of the Chinese efforts to do this in Guam. The Japanese have also reported finding this, and the United States has broadly said that in our continental United States, we've found Chinese and Russian malware in a number of systems. So that is kind of what's called operational preparation of the environment for a future conflict. In other words, stuff you would access during a crisis or contingency to debilitate or destroy American critical infrastructure. The final thing I'll mention is information operations campaigns. We've definitely seen those against Taiwan during elections, during the United States during elections, and of course during Canada during elections. So, the Chinese information operations is becoming much more mature, much more developed. I think it's still probably number two in the world to Russia, kind of world-class information operations dissemblers. But the Chinese are fast learners. They're catching up, and they're very aggressive and working against their perceived adversaries.
In this article for the FDD, you did concentrate on Japan, so a little bit more about that. How has Japan reacted to these cyber threats? Is their resilience any better now?
Yes, but that's because they're coming from a pretty low bar. I would say
Okay.
Japan, of the kind of industrialized allies that the United States has, was very slow to kind of focus on the risk to their own government networks and to their national critical infrastructure. Now, look, the United States is in a glass house here. We have our own challenges with this, but I will say Japan, it actually started with a much poor situational awareness of what the threat is from China. That's gone. They get it. Like any good, like any ally, they would like some help from the United States. They don't want too much help, so they've taken advice from us, but not necessarily the technical assistance. But they have their own ability to do that technical development, and I think they're working hard on it. They've also built basically what we would call a cyber command. In other words, a military organization dedicated to both the defense of their own networks and over time, the development of their own offensive capabilities. And I think they're starting to build a better understanding of what public-private collaboration will be with their ports, with their rail systems. It still lags most other U.S. and U.S. allies, but they're working on it and they're getting there. So I would say it's a work in progress, but they were coming from a very low level.
Gotcha. Understood. So, in the sense that Japan has started to respond to this, uh, is there a lot of U.S. Japan collaboration in this area?
There is, and there needs to be more. What I would say is, the United States does about as much with Japan as they do with any non-Five Eye country. Five Eyes being a intelligence sharing network that involves the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Really, at this point, Japan is as or more critical an ally than some of the other countries in there. And I think it's time that we elevate them to the same level of sharing. Now, part of that is having secure networks. They've had an ugly event in the last few years. But again, we've had ugly events in the last few
Right.
years. But I think it's time to raise them up in that status.
In terms of Japan is obviously a critical ally for the United States, but it's not alone. You mentioned Korea, of course, and the Philippines as another couple of examples. But there's a wider, seems to be a wider collaboration going on with the ASEAN countries, for example, that is starting to happen. We're going to leave this to the next section after the break because I want to give you a full time to consider what's going on in the wider kind of theater of operations, if we can call it that. So hold that thought, sir. We'll be back after the break.